Hello, everybody. It is Illia Hart, and I'm here with Jeffory Schofield, and we are speaking on body electronics again today. Jeffory is going to start out today. He has some topics that he wants to discuss and teach us about, and then we'll go from there. Okay, take it away, Jeffory.
Well, thank you for creating this space for me to just wing it from my heart. That's a delightful, unusual experience for me, believe me.
Yeah, I love that way.
Okay. So the topic I want to dive into is going to tie in something I'm experimenting with right now, but it'll be the connection between unconsciousness and parasites.
Love that.
So I'll just start out with unconsciousness in body electronics is considered to be dealing with the sexual energy. How appropriate that we're discussing this on Valentine's Day. And my journey of self-healing after the basic support system for body electronics shut down after the last VNC, which Illia and I attended, and there's been really very sparse gatherings where people are able to hold points on each other. I've been drawn to different modalities that seem to put me into a healing crisis. And so, because I don't, and I think there's a lot of us listening today that, miss that gathering, and I'm glad that Illia is creating that. But nonetheless, there's been quite a period of time where there has not been an active point holding support system, at least in the United States, that I was aware of. There might be, but I'm not aware of it. So I remember one time in Maui when I'll just tell a personal story, because the sexual energy is probably the most personal topic any of us ever feels or talks about or has the deepest impact on our lives. And everyone listening has had their own journey. And I remember a statement in the I Am teachings by Saint Germain saying that the sexual energy is by far the most difficult energy to learn to master. And there's connection between the resurrection, rise, erection, learning to rechannel that sexual energy to be a resurrectional energy versus a down and out to produce more offspring, which then become our immortality, because the unconscious belief that we have to die, this is the family structure. This is what, when two people come together and they go navel to navel, they exchange the blueprint and the understanding of what they experienced in the womb with their parents. And so the sins of the fathers are passed to the children, to the third and fourth generation, even longer in some traditions. But that's how we all got here. And it's amazing as I've worked with nature as a farmer, both trying to grow plants and the competition with weeds and the incredible abundance of seed that the Creator put into all forms of life to assure and then the competition that goes on in the weeds and under the ground and or in the forest, and the competition for sunlight. Anyway, the story was when I went to Maui with my oldest daughter, Jennifer, who as a young chiropractor, my wife and I are both chiropractors, and we were practicing in Tempe, Arizona. And John had a seminar over in Maui. And so we arranged so that my sister-in-law could fly with me and Jennifer. And I was making enough money at the time that I could afford to do this, you know, type of activity and have the time off because my wife Suzanne was watching the practice. So we got over there and we started holding points on Jennifer. My sister-in-law was just there to babysit, so that during lecture while I was having my points held, I was um, able to be free from the babysitting, so to speak, because she was very young. And as it came, she was the youngest person to ever receive a cranial at a body electronic seminar. And Doug's sister was there, and she did the cranial with her little pinky.
Wow.
And Jennifer was improving. There was definite signs of more cognitive and mobility skills. And then my sister-in-law was sitting in the back, and one day, we were getting ready to point holds, and she'd been watching this point holding, watching Jennifer, and Jennifer was going to be on the table having her points held. So she was like an extra body to hold points. So John came and said, "Would you like to participate in point holding?" And she agreed. And so she got put onto, I think, the STO, and there was someone else holding points with her. And there was a lot of entities being released during this particular session, coming up and out of the belly. And that's part of what I want to correlate with this connection between the parasites. In body electronics, oftentimes they would start in the belly as a word pattern. And it's like the actual parasite, whether it's a pinworm or a fluke or a tapeworm, actually is sustained by the consciousness. And so as we would hold the points, these parasites, which were only allowed within our vacuum space because of our consciousness, would start to come up and out the belly, and they would be verbalized and then released. And there would be experiences like a cold wind going through the room, or sometimes a heat, depending on which level of consciousness, above or below fear, the fear anger junction for the heat. But I never really correlated those thought, word, and emotional patterns of those entities coming out with actually being related to some kind of a physical entity within the body that is what we, as when you have horses, you deworm your horses twice a year, and since they came up with this deworming medication, horses live 20 years longer. And of course, we all see parasitic activity where among people, where some people, are parasitic on others, and they call someone's on top, someone's on the bottom, someone's the rich, someone's the poor. It's the duality. But what I want to bring this connection with unconsciousness to is what I call the pain pleasure complex that I tapped into quite, serendipitously when I was combining the concept that pain is the capstone to memory that we learn in body electronics. And I'd done several cranials, been to the VNC, and I was introduced to this protocol called rebirthing. And Leonard Orr's particular style of rebirthing. And so I started doing that, and I did it for like 5 years with the snorkel and the nose plug, starting out with the dry rebirthing with the rebirther, but then I just like, oh, I can do this. And I do it very regular, and I loved it. It was like a way to point hold, let the universe point hold on me with being in curled up in the fetal position in a bathtub of warm water, or in a swimming pool. At first I wasn't as conscious of what my skin would absorb, but now I try to recreate as much of a saline environment to curl up in. It's even gone to the point where I've saved my own urine, which is what we all bathed in for our 9-month gestation. And it was much necessary for the development of the skin. And I actually created a dip tank where I can do a full body submersion and have a snorkel, and then draw the amniotic fluid, which is aged urine, in my dip tank across my nasal membranes, where in the beginning it was just water with, I experimented with different substances. And one of the most powerful ones was right when I first started. I was working at a horse farm and I was taking care of the mares, and I had access to all this placental tissue. It was like when I went on this path to heal myself, I was just shown the connection between man and beast on so many levels, as well as all life forms. But I would take this placenta and put it in a 5-gallon bucket of water and make ice cubes out of it. And then I'd throw 2 or 3 of those into the tub of water. And it was while working at the horse farm, not far from where I am right now, in a town near what's called Versailles, Missouri, the Treaty of Versailles. Many of you have heard that, but it was, so one day I just had the idea of pain is the capstone to memory. What is the resistance? Why do the rebirthers all over the world, thousands and thousands, I don't know, large numbers of people, want to experience the pleasure without the pain? And this is the connection I made between what I call the pain pleasure complex, which is programmed in the womb when mom and dad have sex during pregnancy, and we temporarily experience a suffocation memory in simultaneously with the pleasure. And old cultures like the Chinese, and I found like many of the old cultures had a taboo against having sex during pregnancy, but today it's pretty much allowed and encouraged by medical professionals, as long as there's not a medical reason that you shouldn't. But what I'm bringing out is there's something of a suppression of consciousness that we inherit from the generations back, as well as what we experience. So back to the story in Maui with my sister-in-law. She was routinely raped by her brothers growing up. And while she was holding the points, one of these entities that came out of her went into her ankle. And it created such a disturbance in her consciousness, and definitely a limp, that she decided to call my ex-wife, now my ex-wife, and tell her that the people in body electronics were casting out demons in the name of Jesus, and that only people with the priesthood in the Mormon church had the right to do this. So it pushed so many buttons. She chose to call Suzanne. Suzanne got on a plane, flew over to Maui, and anyway, she showed up at the seminar when Jennifer was just getting ready to have her points held. And my sister-in-law was driving, and Suzanne came into the seminar at the old YMCA and came in there and jerked Jennifer off of the table and went out and got into the car. And I'm following her out the door, and behind me is John. And I say, John, I'm not going to resist this. I'm going to go with them. He says, okay. And he blessed me, and I went on my way. And what wound up happening is my sister-in-law decided not to come back to the seminar and babysit, but Suzanne could see that there was enough of improvement in Jennifer that she allowed me to continue with the rest of the seminar with Jennifer. So that's the way that cookie crumbled. And then after we finished the seminar. I got back on the plane with Jennifer and was seated next to my sister-in-law, who had, in my mind, created quite a stir. But then, as time went by and this entity went into her ankle, she went to the brethren of the priesthood in the Mormon church and had a blessing and had this entity cast out. But John said there's no vacuums in the universe, and the only reason that entity was allowed to enter into her body is because it's right at the reflex for the reproductive organs on the ankle. If you remember John talking about having someone lovingly rub out his reflex points on his ankle once, and he was thankful for he was able to love it. So the way this whole thing carried out, as far as this pain pleasure complex, is I was basically like ostracized from my family for what I was remembering and what I was speaking from what I'd learned in the body electronics. And my sister-in-law then, when she returned home, and my brother, my older brother, they both supported Suzanne in creating a barrier to where I didn't have access to my kids or my grandkids by making my stuff weird. And this continues to this day, to the point where I have been willing to experience this, as I was talking with Illia earlier, about the incredible level of abandonment that I've drawn into my experience from my own genetics. And I don't think it's by accident. I think there's a very deep understanding of the pain pleasure complex that needs to come into our awareness as far as honoring the times of a woman. I actually came across, after 20 years of being ridiculed for saying that sex during pregnancy was a violation of the fetus, I found a book called the Oahspe Bible. And in this Bible, it goes back 125,000 years with the Creator's dealings with our earth and the 3,000-year cycles. But anyway, every cycle, the biggest challenge that the cosmic beings had was getting people not to have sex during pregnancy. This has been the continuous cause of death and dying ruling on our earth, because we have free will. And so the Creator in his love, and this is what I was exposed to in my journey with all the animals, birds, and fishes being the ones in Revelations given the responsibility for the end of time. And we're talking about the time-space continuum. And what is time itself? The placenta on the wall was our first time clock. The mom's heartbeat was our tick-tock. And that ran our life for 9 months. And we had to create something outwardly as humans to represent this incredible memory that we all had. And that's how we built our bodies. But all of the other animals, birds, and fishes that hold the keys to the end of time, they are programmed vehemently, some of them, to not engage in sex after just after pregnancy begins. For example, a mare will stample a stallion that tries to mount her when she's pregnant. I learned this from people that raised horses. They've seen it. They've bred the horses. They know that this is hardwired. With a pig, one of the very, very commonly consumed meat, the sow. Even though I worked in a confinement where the sows were chained, the only control they had about whether they'd let a boar pregnate them was they would just drop to their knees if they weren't ready, and he would be too tall. Of course, everyone has had cats and dogs, and you've seen it, basically any mammal that has a placenta is programmed to not engage in sex during pregnancy. And so the medical profession has kind of tweaked our understanding of gestation and implantation, and where I think this whole parasite unconsciousness framework has its powers, because we've been violating this law. And so every one of us has different parasites that block the I am presence from expressing freely through our being. We were talking earlier about carbs and sugar addiction and the incredible suppression of this I am presence through the sugar addictions. And Illia has been engaged in a long fast, and but sugar was the glucose was the primary source of energy in the womb. And our mother prepared these meals just like a woman is assigned the role of making meals. Is from this unconscious memory in the womb, when this food, like a fast food restaurant, was just handed out. We'll call it the umbilical window. It just comes in, and we don't have to do anything. We just and so the fast food industry, all of these preservatives, they're all there to suppress any kind of connection with this memory of the pain pleasure complex that was imposed by the violation of this law of the creator to honor the times of a woman. And when she is bearing unto thee, I'll quote the Oaspian, and when she is bearing unto thee, thou shalt not lie with her, nor fret her, nor give her heavy labor. For she is thy queen, and it is her time. And you shall teach this to thy children and to their children for generations. And this is the original meaning of adultery, but that got tweaked by our current religious controllers, who are, in essence, the real parasites. And that's why parasitism, and that's why this medical doctor I met has had such a difficult time raising the awareness of the incredible healings that happen when he basically treats a person like a horse and deworms them. And these worms are actually part of the parasitism that is a reflection of the violation of this law of creation. So I'm in the middle of a parasite cleanse. It's the first time I've ever tried this. And talk about healing crises. It's like if you can't get somebody to hold your points and get these parasites to come out up through the belly and speak them out, just go take some more medication. But don't do it without. I would recommend that you get what's called acupuncture meridian assessment by someone who knows about Reinhold Voll's original work with the connection between the teeth and the meridians. Because the creator, when he set me up for this journey, I was a chiropractor, and it was at the same time I was learning about body electronics, and John Ray was teaching to have the metal taken out of your teeth and replaced with plastics. And it was at the same time I'd crossed paths with this man named Benawana, whose dad was a kahuna, but he never trained as a kahuna. I know John loved the kahuna teachings. So he had this consciousness passed on to his son, even though he never trained. And he was trained by Reinhold Voll. He's one of Reinhold Voll's original students. And for whatever reason, in the karmic, conscious, cosmic plan, I was the one he came to because I was looking for answers for my daughter, Jennifer. And he called me, invited me to his home to discuss energy balancing. Long story short, I took my parents there. He had worked with 1,100 people over a 30-year period in Maui and in Hawaii. He was known as the wheatgrass man. And he would measure people on the dermatron, and he would, which Simon, you called as acupuncture meridian assessment. And he would basically encourage people that had a lot of feelings to get full extractions. None of this, one tooth here, one tooth there. You know, root canals are incredibly jamming of the meridian system. But anyway, my parents both had cancer diagnosed at the time I was exposed to this. I was a young buck, 32 years old. So I took them to see this man, and he measured their points, 10 points on each hand, 10 points on each foot. And everyone, a perfectly balanced meridian will measure 50 on a scale of 0 to 100. It's the same ohm meter we used in the body electronics, the galvanic skin response. But on the acupuncture points, it comes through very specifically. So it's a very exacting read of the body's energy system. And Simon Yu's experience with parasite medications is that's one of the fastest ways to bring every meridian to a perfect balance. And then people will experience tremendous healing, just like as an accident from taking this medication. He's written a book called Accidental Cure. You can find him online, Simon Yu. So
how do you spell his
he has
last
another
name?
book, YU.
YU, okay.
YU. He's a very valuable resource, and I'm just being what I've learned about Reinhold Voll, he was unaware of. He learned from other people about how to do this acupuncture meridian assessment. He didn't know that Reinhold Voll himself had his teeth pulled. And the dentists in America and the world, for that matter, are pretty much, save the tooth at all costs. Obviously, there's no money when the teeth are out. But that might be, the creators knew this. I was exposed to this understanding. And instead of going with what John Ray was taught by other dentists who had perverted Reinhold Voll's work to, save the tooth at all costs, just replace the fillings. After seeing my parents' remission of cancer and seeing their dermatron readings go from just above 20 to just below 80 on every meridian to a perfect 50 the day following their extractions down in Nogales, Mexico, Tucumcari, I don't know, down in Mexico anyway, south of Phoenix, where I was practicing. Then my ex-wife, my Suzanne, decided to go ahead and have our teeth pulled, and we went down with them in a van and walked across the border. 45 minutes later, I was toothless because in Mexico, they're too poor to afford, these fancy bridge works and stuff. So dentists are trained, and Ben had found a dentist down there that would extract my teeth. So I was basically toothless, and I sat in a chair with some gauze in my mouth and just gently clenching to stop the bleeding. No scraping, none of this. What they're doing now is slamming a set of dentures in the mouth right away. He said, let that bleed. Those meridians have been jammed and there's just noxious stuff will be coming out of the meridians. And that's where these parasites live, is in the meridians, and are able to morph into the biofield and back into the body. That's why they're so difficult to control on a conscious level. But just by deworming somebody, it's the fastest way to change consciousness, I think. If you don't have a point holding group, or it can be combined, I don't know where this is going, but it's pretty exciting because the powers that be really don't want us to remember this pain pleasure complex and how it gives a safe space for these parasites to dwell within our being. They say that our own DNA is 10% of us, and the rest of us the microbiome. So maybe that's what they don't say it as a parasite. There's a whole new research into the microbiome, and maybe that's why you experience dropping out of ketosis, because you still have a few parasites in there that pick right up on that, which could be dewormed, and then it's like, oh, then you don't have this, you could just do a balance, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, it might change the parameters that you currently deal with.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. So it's very fascinating.
We certainly love the carbohydrates.
Looking at it. Now, I want to take this thing of parasites and just understand that we as humans had a basic parasite gestation. We were the parasite. Our mom and dad bring together two separate gene pools, and as the fertilization happens, we tumble along the fallopian tube, we arrive in the uterus, and by the time we get there, we've formed 8 cells generally. And there was a researcher in the 1800s named John Baird, that's spelled Baird, and I mentioned him last week or the week before. but John Baird studied fish and the gestation of fish, and he found it true with all mammals throughout the board that there's this pattern of embryogenesis in all of these life forms. But the fish was easy to study. It wasn't controversial. You're not doing abortions or harvesting human eggs or whatever to study the embryogenesis, which they're doing now with great delight, trying to figure this whole thing out. But this was known back in the 1800s. Come on, people, why did certain parts of it get suppressed? And the parasites is what got suppressed. But because we are parasites, and that we have to look at, okay, envision a ball and 8 cells, the original 8, 1, 2, 4, 8. And one cell drops down a single stalk, and then that would be the umbilical cord that we all have had. And then the fetus forms inside the ball. And then all those other 8 cells, all the 8 cells are parasitic in nature. When they implant into the wall of the womb, they're parasitizing the wall of the womb. And what John Baird found in his research is that he was known for curing cancer with pancreatic enzymes. But he first got the ideas from studying embryogenesis. So at the 56th day of gestation is when the pancreatic enzymes come online in the human. And this was all known back in the 1800s, and he was curing people of their cancer by using 2 enzymes. And I'll bastardize the names, but if you look up John Baird, it's there. The research is there. That's a lot, man. I've been going like a banjo here. Why don't you give me a little breather here, Illia, with some thoughts?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things that come up that I want to ask you about. So I'd like you to share, like, how many days have you been on the parasite cleanse, and maybe share a little bit of your experience around that, and I can jump in after too and share a bit of experience of what because I've been practicing parasite cleansing for a number of years, and so it's been cyclical and intermittent, with my experience. So is this your first main parasite cleanse? Is this something that's new?
Yes.
Okay.
This is brand new.
Okay.
And I would say 9 days into it. This is just like, and the timing of talking about this on Valentine's Day, you gotta chuckle sometimes. But last night I had one of the most exotic dreams. I think I crossed so many interdimensional places. Yesterday, what there's during this whole 9-day period, it's just been using all I know to deal with the die-off effect of all these parasites that I had no clue were, making it to the point where I had very little wiggle room. I'd found the EE system, the energy enhancement system. And that, at the time I found it, was about 2.5 months ago. And I had a back pain issue back then to where I could hardly roll over in bed, low back, L5 area. And getting that extra energy from the EE system brought me out of it. And so I was giving credit to the EE system. And I was going through, we opened a small office there. And I think anyone that's watched has seen that progression. And I was going through Joe's files and calling her old patients, because she practiced for 10 years in St. Louis, and we're trying to build a little practice because we both feel the benefit of this energy from the EE system as far as voltage is healing. Healing is voltage. There's a book written by Tennant that has that title, but it's energy medicine. So the yes, it was probably, and it's curious that it would just happen yesterday, and I'm talking today. Cause I think on some level this is all like a spontaneous thing. But I have a pickup truck, a 95 Silverado GMC, and I use it to get firewood. And I was out getting firewood on this. I had this one field on this property that, what happens with these hay fields here in the Midwest and everywhere really is the plants are encroaching on the field for sunlight, and the people with the haying equipment, every year they lose 2 or 3 feet because they're afraid they're going to damage their equipment. So you have all these trees leaning in and brush. And so since I've been on this property 12 years now, I took it on me to reclaim 20 to 30 feet of the perimeter of all these beautiful fields that I have. So there was this one last piece that I cut down last summer, and I stacked it up with a lot of green stuff, so let it cure. And I've gone through all my wood this winter, and so it was time to go get it. So I went out after I started this parasite cleanse, and I went out and this was the last of the, is almost reflection of the last block in consciousness. That was, like John Ray says, the things which are right in front of us will set us free. The simplest things in life will set us free. So I picked up a big log, and my back was feeling fine. And I was anyway. Anyone that's ever cut firewood and loaded in the back of a pickup, I've probably heard stories about somebody rolling a log or throwing a log into the back window. Well, that's what I did. I shattered my back window in my truck. I've used this truck for so long to get wood, but there was just something about I set the log and it rolled, and I was just like, okay, love it. And so I brought, I finished loaded, and I got a tarp and to keep the rain out, and I finished getting all this wood out of this one field and brought it in. And then yesterday, I had a piece of plexiglass, and I didn't want to bring in $300-400 bill and this plexiglass, I was able to cut it in shape, and it was an all-day project. And when I got done with that, I got down off the truck, and my low back pain returned. The one that I thought had been healed by this. And again, I'm 3 times a day taking this parasitic medication. So the pain we experience, the pain pleasure complex, is somehow linked in with our pain pleasure complex, pain being the capstone to memory in body electronics. So it's like I was able to straighten up, and I breathed for a little bit, and it was like, okay. I took a shower, had a meal, went to bed, and I thought, okay, I'll just, and during the night is when I had this, this exotic dream. And, I at 3 o'clock was my time to take the medication. So I woke up and I took the medication. And when I went back to sleep, about 2 hours later, I just went to roll over, and the middle of my back just kind of like went, anybody that's had their back just kind of do and it's like you're locked up, and such intense pain, but it was tied to my low back too. And it's right in the middle, like where people, as they get older, you know how there's that, the dominance of these fetal memories curls people back up in a ball, regardless of how much they try to stop this eventual dominance of these parasitic fetal memories. Not making it wrong, but that's how we got here. It was at the 56th day of gestation that the parasitic activity of our placenta stops by the signaling of the pancreatic enzyme. And trophoblasts, which is what these cells are called that make up the placenta that dig in and create this connection of blood supply between the mom and the baby, they're considered cancerous in nature. And it's the pancreatic enzyme that turns off the pancreatic assault of the placenta at just the right time to where the fetus is able to talk the mom into letting it be a parasite and suck and push off of her for 9 months to build its body. So this is what was not taught, even though it was known back in the 1890s. So Dr. Yu has been traveling all over when he's invited, because his is such a unique perception, and he's able to measure the meridians. And so he's looking, and he's teaching medical doctors and dentists. You know, he's going to a conference in May, I guess, or in March, actually, just next month, down in Mexico, where there's a bunch of dentists. And so this is like an up and coming understanding that he's at the core of bringing to an awareness. And then I come into contact him, and I give him more information about Vold than he even knew. And tonight he has a monthly meeting, and I'm going to go to it. And I just feel like there's some kind of a help that's coming from not only the technology with the EE system, and he actually came to the center because he's very interested in this scalar wave biophotonic energy, because that's something that his patients struggle with is energy, because of, you know, the parasite medication. It's really intense. And so I've been implementing colonics and coffee enemas this past week. When I start to feel the parasite die off, start to take like towards a little more difficult to breathe, or I have pain, that's my go-to. And the thing that's really curious is the Hulda-Clark liver flesh, where he learned about this years ago, and he will have 2 weeks. He does 3 rounds of this parasite medication, and so this is his protocol is that he's come up with to get the meridians to stay balanced, because these parasites are so tricky, just like our thought, word, and emotional patterns are so tricky, and they can hide, and they hide in so many different crevices of consciousness, but they're supported unconsciously by the parasitic microbiome, if you want to, for lack of a better word.
Right. What are the days in his protocol? What is the intermittent days of the cleansing?
Okay, so he goes 2 weeks parasite medication, 1 week rest, where you do the Hulda-Clark liver flesh. Then you go back on 2 weeks parasite medication, do the Hulda-Clark liver flesh. 2 weeks of medication, do the Hulda-Clark liver flesh.
Wow.
And I've done the Hulda-Clark liver flesh over 20 times myself, and I've passed thousands of these liver stones out of my biliary tree. And they're like green little sludge balls. And it's greatly improved my digestion. But when I first met Simon, before I went to him and he measured me and he put me on his prescriptions, he had mentioned in his meeting that ivermectin, which is a common horse dewormer, which a lot of people have used to cure themselves of COVID. It's supposedly only for horses, but again, that's just the suppression of this understanding by the big pharma of, the parasites in place makes better money for them and their antacids or whatever people are taking for their digestive issues. So yeah, that's the balance. And so I'm on Friday will be my end of my 2 weeks. So then I'll be doing the hold the Clark liver flush. But I was going to say that just out of shits and giggles, I had some ivermectin that I'd use for my dog, and so I did myself 2 days of dosing twice a day, just like the shape of the size of a pea, which would be about a 250-pound animal for a 1,250-pound horse. Just size of a pea, I'd and then it had been about 5 days since I stopped that because I was starting to feel the die-off effect. And so, shit, man, what's going on? And so I
What was
felt
the
after
what was your
a
experience
few
of the
days to
dialogue?
do the whole Clark liver flush, and it was like I well, it's like hard to breathe. It's like that was what I noticed that obviously encouraged me to do something about it, because you stop breathing, you're not very well off for the journey I'm on.
So
So yeah,
that was part of the die-off symptoms? Was like you were having like a shortness of breath, or?
yes, yeah. So I did the whole Clark liver flush, and I passed this gallstones that looked the same. They must have been from a different uh, lobe of the liver that had never opened up before because the parasites had locked it down. I cleaned 2 lobes doing the hold the Clark liver flush over the 20 years. But when I first heard of hold the Clark, and she said in her work, she said, do the parasite cleanse before you do this. And I'd done colonics for years, and I thought, I'm not going to have any parasites. I cleaned my colon so many times. I had no idea how tricky parasites, and I'm still learning how tricky, as well as word patterns, how well we can hide from ourself.
Right. Right.
So
That's really interesting, Jeffory. I feel like one of the things that, I mean, I've been looking at that whole ivermectin COVID connection, over the last 3 years. Of course, it was forbidden. The public health from every country that I'm aware of made it a forbidden medication. So and I attempted to get it way back when, and in Canada that was just completely forbidden for people for any doctors to prescribe it. And then I remembered I had when I lived on Salt Spring, I had a naturopathic doctor for a period of time. I went to him a couple of times, and then I remembered that he had taken that sort of an extra course that naturopath doctors in Canada can do, and they can be registered to give pharmaceutical drugs. And I remembered that he was one of those people. So I contacted him, and he wrote me back immediately and said, no, they had gotten the letter from the College of Naturopathic College, not from the physicians and surgeons that give the orders on down to the medical doctors, the allopathic doctors, but he had gotten it from the naturopathic college that he was forbidden as well to prescribe ivermectin, even though, as we know now, it's like one of the safest drugs on the market and has received all kinds of awards and so forth. So that made me really curious about the parasitic connection between COVID and parasites. So, I spent a lot of time learning about it and a lot of time experimenting on it on myself, and doing for a little while. I did natural parasitic antiparasitics. So the wormwood and the black walnut and so on. There's so many different combinations.
clove oil.
Yes, yeah. And I used several different combinations. And in my past experimentation with parasite cleansing, I realized that intermittent parasite cleansing is is really key. I mean, I've been recommending that to my clients, because in iridology, of course, we can see where there is parasitic infection or parasitic hosting, as we call it, and which means the host condition is there for parasites, which makes it very likely that the person does have parasites. And I found that, especially, well, I found with myself, this is the first clue that it came when I would travel to the Caribbean, for example. Like, I remember in the late 90s, I went to the Dominican Republic. And when I came back from there, I had severe parasitical infection that took me at least 6 months, probably was much longer than that, but at least 6 months of very dedicated effort to pull myself out of it. This was pre body electronics for me. But I was doing an Ayurvedic degree at that time, and I'd been in holistic practice for already a number of years. So I was really working hard on parasites, in these certain types of parasites that came from the Dominican Republic. But then I saw that every time I went to the Caribbean, I went to Cuba and different places for vacation, I would inevitably have these disruptions in my biome, and so I would work away on it in a natural way. So lately, because I do like to experiment. I feel like it, we have to do these things. We have to experience these things. I think it has to be, for me, I have to experience it before I can, let it out.
Sure.
Anybody, it has to be, I have to really truly understand it. And, and I was given 24 years with an Ojibwe elder who taught me that very thing about, you have to really experience the medicine. You have to know the medicine before you would ever even attempt to recommend it for anybody else. So in that energy, I acquired some ivermectin, and I am on, I think I've done 3 rounds of ivermectin. And I don't have any sort of forefronting that I will go. I know I'll do it again, but I don't know when. I've been doing it, intermittently, and seeing like what the effect is and what the die-off is and what the symptoms are and so forth. And it's a really interesting process. One of the things that I've understood now, just through more my own physical responses, is because I was feeling that something passed the blood-brain barrier. Now there's so many theories, and everything is theoretical at this point, but for my own personal experience, I know that I became very ill 3 years ago now. Like, this week is my 3rd year anniversary, and I became very ill. And from that, I had continued symptoms that sort of were intermittent in their continuation. So they would rise and they would fall, and they would rise and they would fall, these symptoms. And I was having symptoms which I felt were parasitical, that had passed the blood-brain barrier as a result of this illness because there was none of these symptoms prior to this illness, like literally none. So then I would never take a COVID test, because they are, we know that they are part of the problem. But I just do it how I experience it. And I really feel that whatever that is, whether it's a bioweapon that came and, that was eventually called COVID-19, whether that was a bioweapon that was, done in a lab, we don't have proof of that. We have, I think we have a lot of sort of anecdotal and ideas around that, but I haven't seen any actual, anything that proves that completely. But I do feel, for myself, I do feel that that's a very definite possibility. I saw it come into my body like a bioweapon, and so how I see it in sort of a internal way, all sort of medical aside and medicine aside and all of that, in internal way, I saw it as this very small, microscopic, and it could be very technologically based rather than what we think of as parasitic, as far as like a biological parasite, what we're familiar with. I feel that this is more perhaps a technological parasite. And I've experienced that and have been working with that, like I said, for now, it's been 3 full years. So it's been a really interesting process. I'm still working with it. So, it's still ongoing. And like I said, it has rises and falls, just like sort of it will take over a certain area of the body. And then I will work with that, like the liver, for instance, liver has to filter everything out. So the liver it would get congested with this, and I would recognize my body. And this is just within this 3-year period. So I would recognize this liver congestion, whatever the body is trying to rid of itself out, whatever, the lymphatic system is getting dumped and filtered. And so I'm working with all the systems of the body, all of the systems that remove toxins, toxicity, and what I feel is very minute, we could call it nanoparticle, very minute, and I do feel that they are parasitical in nature, but we're yet to discover really what form they have taken in the body. So I've developed this immense, and I've also experienced that one of the rises of it I've experienced when I've been in contact with people who have taken the injections, the most recent injections. And other people, I've heard it referred to in so many different ways, but we all get the idea of what that is. And so when I come in contact with people that have been injected, especially close contact, we know that shedding and transmission can be given through the breath and through perspiration. We know that that has been occurring. And I've noticed when I do come in contact with people, I have a rise in symptoms, and then I have to really be aware of that and really go through this intense detoxification protocol that I've created and still am experimenting and creating. So it's really interesting. And so the parasitic, there's a couple of things around the parasites. So that's kind of dividing it into like the sort of biological parasites that we've been used to, and more of the technological parasites. I think that it's important to make those two distinctions. And one of the things that I discovered was the different ways in which the natural antiparasitics, it only got to a certain point, and it wasn't really effective. It wasn't really, clearly effective. What I think it was effective on is removing any biological parasites, which then allowed the body's immune system to really flourish and really come back into more fully more healthy. And then that would go after the technological parasites. So the immune system was then really able to work when got rid of the maybe old parasites from travel, or from being around animals, or from water sources. Who knows where parasites come into us, the natural parasites. And so it was just allowing that immune system to be more effective. That's how I experienced it. So I'm still not, even though I've done like I said, the ivermectin as an experimentation, I still haven't discovered the completeness of what I feel is the technological parasites and the removal of the technological parasites. So that's still, I'm still working with that. I'm using, a huge protocol, especially the body electronics nutritional protocol. I've upped that, and the minerals, the trace minerals that we use in body electronics to bring on a healing crisis, they attach, as we know, they attach to toxins in the body, the trace minerals, the liquid particularly. I don't find as much, as far as detoxification, I don't find as much effectiveness in the caps, the mineral caps. I take those as more of a nutritional supplementation, but when I really want to get into some complete detoxification, then I really up the liquid minerals. So the liquid minerals has been very effective, and especially in that die-off period, that has been very effective. I always take more liquid minerals during that time, and that's really been helpful in that sort of parasitic die-off period. So
I have something that came into my mind when you're speaking that relates back to what my journey in prenatal memory. I've studied what they can see on ultrasound and fetal movement studies. And one thing that they found is there's a rhythmic expansion and contraction of the pharyngeal space, and they say they don't know what it's for. And that would be the part of the body that the liquid minerals are attached to or confronting that the pills wouldn't confront. And also another thing I've remembered, and Drunvalo McKeswick in his books says in one place that the newborn infant's rectum is expanding and contracting with each breath. So it's the only place of a reputable source other than I've experienced it in connection with my belly button pulsing. So we're hooked up in the womb to the umbilical cord, and we are actively involved with the suck-push mechanism. That's the kissing part, which we're talking about today. When we're in the womb, and so this part, there's 4 phases to the in-uterine breathing mechanism, and outwardly they're known as the hiccup and the sneeze. And the hiccup, if you think about the muscles you use, it's a sucking mechanism. And on the hiccup, the initial is it's an inhalation. So three of the 4 steps in the in-uterine breathing mechanisms are inspiratory in essence, or a sucking along the umbilical cord, and the chew part. That's why the only cleansing mechanism we get a God bless you for is the chew, because people know unconsciously that there's some bad shit going down if you're sneezing from the prenatal memory, because that's how the body, is able. And so the cold, right, the COVID, cold-like symptoms, is all related to this in-uterine breathing mechanism, which we all use. And the thing that's most curious, that I think is going to blow a few people's minds if they really take this in, is that we don't learn to swallow until the 7th month. So all those things that you swallow down, if you like take those minerals in and gargle them and get them all around where the actual fluids were during your gestation, it's going to have a more of effect on the parasitic memories, because it's that's when we are parasitic, is in the womb. So that's why it has more, nauseous feelings or whatever comes up when you swallow the liquid minerals. But
So
the point I want to make that's really curious that I didn't get to yet is they've been able to see on fetal movement studies the direction of the flow of the fluid through the nares in the mouth. And it's 90% a regurgitation flow. In other words, flu-like symptoms. Why do they want elderly to go get the flu shots to suppress any kind of a regurgitation flu-like symptom? But so the direction of the flow of the fluid is out the nares and out the mouth in the wound. They use dyes. They've seen this. They know this in fetal movement studies because of the 4D ultrasound, the exceptional clarity with which they can monitor the fetal space right now would end this discussion right now, tomorrow, if they would let the fetus have its say, which is the title of my book you can find on Amazon. If you want to give me a little help with some bank, I would appreciate it. But anyway, if you don't, that's okay, because the truth is the truth, and my little pipsqueak voice isn't going to make a difference on what's going to happen. Is either it's like that's the twinkling of an eye that I'm going for, because that's the only way where big pharma and these people making these nanobot parasites and all these people are trying to control all this, that it's all about genocide and trying to suppress life here on Earth. But the key here is Tesla said everything in creation is energy, frequency, and vibration. If you want to look to understand life, you look there. So what do we perceive through our ears? Music, and you can hear a song. It'll take you back to a memory. You can smell the nasal memory that I elicited with drawing water across my nasal membranes and loving that pain. That's the first cranial nerve in the way the Creator set things up. But the auditory, we through the eustachian tube. This is what the purpose of this in-uterine breathing mechanism is with the hiccup, is to suck amniotic fluid through the ear canal into the back of the throat, so that the semicircular canals and the eardrum and that whole balance mechanism, which is so vital to our, existence on Earth, or to be. My daughter has cerebral palsy. I know a little bit about what it means to not have these abilities, and the resistance to that manifesting in my life is what put me into this position to understand this information. But anyway, we suck it in through the ear and we blow it out our mouth and nose. That's why when they see the movement of the flow, that fluid has to come from somewhere. We aren't swallowing yet. Where is it coming from? It has to be that it's a natural, and that's why you look at a baby and they're just, the back of their throat is going. And it's not something you can really see unless you have this high definition 4D ultrasound, and they do specific, angles on the pharyngeal space. And this research was done back in the 70s when ultrasound came out, and they saw that the fetus did not like sex during pregnancy, and they call it an anoxic insult injury. For 10 years, the OBGYNs fought among themselves about whether to tell the patients to engage in sex during pregnancy or not. And then in the 80s, they came together, unified, and said, it's okay unless they're bleeding or have a history of miscarriage or some reason, they'll tell them not to have sex during pregnancy. But see, this keeps those parasites alive and happy, and it keeps death and dying in place. It's huge. And what I'm talking about is, the flu-like symptoms, cold, COVID, my belly button pulsing for 28 years now. And I can't turn it off ever since I elicited the nasal pain and loved it in the fetal position. It's like this has been my journey, is to set the people free, that we did it to ourselves. We violated the law. We can undo it. We can only when you accept responsibility for an activity in your life can you become responsible for and change it and shift it. So right. By the simple act of you and me just talking today, and the viewers hearing it, I'm hopeful, because this is like information that will either get me taken out by a nanobot parasite, or it's going to help those people that are ready to shift, learn how to use their love energy constructively instead of destructively. And this belief in death and dying, that's why the family structure, what I experienced with having my 4 children and my ex-wife and now 19 grandchildren, that I'm basically, I have no supportive contact with them. I can look at their Facebook accounts, keep track of how many kids they got and stuff, but they don't even like that, I think, because it's like on some level, even religion is a parasitic in nature, because they're still teaching death and dying, but they do, some religions talk about Jesus coming back. And I'm not saying he's not, but what I'm saying is it's like we have to be ready. This is he can't come when people are still completely, unconscious, so that's what consciousness awakening, why it's so important. And the lowest level is the sexual energy. And that's where if anyone that's got their eyes open and sees what's going on in the news with different perceptions of what we are, sexually, with artificial intelligence, there's just so much going on, but it's all, if you look at it, it's just the unconscious desire of every human being to understand their sexual energy. That's the power. If you're in a power struggle, master yourself, master your own sexual energy, then you'll know what your power is. It's not outside of you. It's always been inside, but it's been clouded by violation of the laws of the Creator regarding bringing children to the world, or, some people choose to be nuns or priests, and or Buddhic monks, but still it's learning to master these energies. And I've always felt that, our ultimate potential would be to have heaven on earth and to end death and dying. And that's the promise of the scriptures. But my goal has always, since I was, abandoned by my original support system, was, well, just do the best you can. See if you can put yourself in alignment with the divine plan for the greatest good. How can you be of the greatest service? And that's where I am now. I live on a farm, 30 acres, and my beautiful ducks and geese have been basically my entertainment. But also I've learned a tremendous deal from the birds as far as their connection with ending time, everything in the heavens, everything in the earth, and everything in the sea. I have one duck. He's a white male, and he's just perfectly white, a Muscovy duck. And he always sets himself apart, like he's somehow special and different. And this morning when I got up, he was standing right in front of my door, waiting for me, with one foot up, standing up, doing like the tree pose. And I said, hello. And he lifted his head up, and he just made like he was laughing at me. He says, hi. It's like somehow all these creatures that, I've had dreams which show that everyone starts as consciousness, and that we can choose to be whatever we want to be in different embodiments. And we've probably done it all.
Yeah.
So unification. That's what my goal is. Union of all life. This is a turkey feather I picked up out of the woods the other day. Wild turkey. Yeah, I love feathers. I think it's actually very symbolic of the stock the umbilical cord, if you look at that and look at all of these as the meridians, and then this is the central channel.
Yeah.
I think
How the blood is fed through
yeah.
into the feather.
And you know how you love the eagle feather, and you went down and gifted it, and they were waiting for you. So yeah, the feather. One of my teachers, his name was Dr. Paul. I lived on his farm for 4.5 years, homeopathic, and he taught me so much about the connection between man and beast and how to heal with the animals, birds, and fishes. But he had a saying that he called himself, he had an Indian heritage, and he called himself, and it was be all one feather. That was his motto. It's like, you know, in the feather, there is oneness. Look at the harmony that exists. Look at the incredible detail. Just every one of those is hooked into the central channel. Nobody's lost. We're all part of the one feather. We all started in the womb. It's symbolized in the Creator has done everything he can to give us our free will on how we use our sexual energy. And it's our choice. We can either honor the times of a woman, or we can start making incubator babies. I guess that's what it's coming to.
Thank you, Jeff. That's really, that's been really great. I feel like I want to just put a little bit to add on to that. Okay. To say whatever comes, this is for the people watching. So in body electronics, whatever comes to awareness, we have the 3 creative aspects that we bring together. That's the memory, whether they're in vitro memories, whatever memories come, the memory, the word pattern, and the emotion that goes. There's always emotion that comes. So those are the 3 creative aspects that we want to find simultaneously. And when we find that simultaneously, then to transmute that is to encompass with love, forgiveness, and gratitude. So we bring it into the present, and we bring the memory, emotion, and word pattern into the present, and we transmute that energy with the energy of love, the energy of forgiveness, and the energy of gratitude. And we really bring that into it. And that sometimes it takes a little while, depending on what comes up out of the unconscious. So the unconscious, like Jeffory said, that works with and is in connection with the reproductive organs, the testes in the male and the ovaries in the female, all of the, I call it a repository. The unconscious is a repository for the unconscious. So when that comes, when something comes into our awareness, comes up from the unconscious, then we get to work with it. And I think that's really, really key here. That's really important. So let's keep working with it. We move through the emotional body to a point. Someone asked me this morning about 0 ohms resistance in the time-space continuum warp. So I just want to, do you feel complete in what you said, Jeffory?
Right now I do. I might have something else pop up, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to say I'm just going to read a little bit from the body electronics experience. 0 ohms resistance in the time-space continuum warp. So to experience the time-space continuum warp, one must be capable of being cause and being effect simultaneously, while recreating the resistance to being both cause and effect, and recreating the resistance to the resistance of being both cause and effect. That's from the Logic and Sequence series from John Whitman Ray, book 3, The Electrification of Matter. So, and then I'll just complete with this. One encompasses darkness by focusing on the light. One encompasses death by focusing on life. One cannot learn about the light by focusing on darkness. The light comprehends darkness, but darkness does not comprehend light. Life comprehends death, but death cannot comprehend life. One cannot comprehend love by focusing on resistance, but by focusing on love, the love encompasses, comprehends, and dispels the resistance. And then I just add, I include this advanced material so we have knowledge of the vastness of body electronics. These topics and advanced disciplines are taught and practiced in the visualization and consciousness course, which is the advanced teachings of body electronics, which hasn't been given since 2005. I feel like in the future, I'm coming up to my first 5-day body electronics point holding intensive that I've held since 2015. And it's going to be held here near Nelson, British Columbia, and June 5th to 9th. I am teaching daily through the body electronics group page on Facebook. So that's a really great place for people to tap in. I've been putting several posts daily on there. We completed the holistic fast, the 43-day holistic fast. We completed that last Sunday. So now I'm into strictly talking about body electronics and helping people prepare for the upcoming course, because so much preparation has to be done between now and then. And the sooner the better to get on those preparations. Preparations are key to the results that are going to be received during the intensive. So I feel like my future intent for intensives is to reach enough people so that there is going to be 3 intensives like Doug had. He had those 3 intensives per year, and I really felt that was such a perfect opportunity for people to really truly delve into changing their consciousness and keeping that motivation going, and really keeping it keeping that upscale movement within the evolutionary process. And that's what I would like to create. And so we'll start this June, and we'll go from there, depending on several factors, but depending on precipitation, you know what I mean. And then we'll keep it going. It's all about that evolutionary process within us, that transmutational process that we keep going with it. I think that's important to know. Do you want to finish us off today with some words? At least finish off our talk today.
Oh, we're leaving here in a little bit.
Okay, which vehicle are you taking? Oh, okay. All right, thanks. That's my neighbor. Let me sit in the driveway so I can communicate with everybody. But I can't think of anything that I have to say that wouldn't take a lot of time. That's from my perspective, but something you just said about your 43-day fast spurred a memory that Simon you recently said, is he had one patient who decided to do a 40-day fast, and he asked Simon to monitor him with his acupuncture meridian assessment equipment during the fast. And Simon, you put him on a vegetable broth fast. He says you don't want to go at it and without some kind of liquid and some kind of, use vegetables. But anyway, after the 40 days, he tested him, and all the parasites had died. There was no parasitic activity showing up in his meridians on a 40-day fast, which then goes into the cheapest way to cleanse yourself of parasites. And when I say that, the parasite medication that he gets through a private pharmacy for my 6 weeks parasite course was $790, which I was not in a position to afford. And I've been blessed because I have connections through the veterinary, or just, and my partner Joe helped me out with dosing. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I just couldn't afford it and I wanted to proceed. So if there's a will, there's a way, because that's how I proceeded.
Beautiful.
But
Well, thank you
yeah,
for sharing. Thank you for sharing your words today, Jeffory. It's really great to just bring things out into the awareness of others, and then people can be inspired. So thank you very much.
likewise, I always enjoy sharing Heart's Light with you. It's good.
Okay, well, and until next Tuesday, then we'll sign off, and have a great week.
Bye-bye, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah.